Hello, welcome to Agile World. Hello, Sabrina. It's ages since I've seen you. Have you been on holiday?
I wish. I wish. It's been, I've got to admit, it's been a while since we've obviously got a new background now. My favorite color. For once, Karl has actually listened to me. I got my own way. Very rare. Hopefully we get it a little bit more. But no, it's
Was
great to be
I
back
was
on.
overruled.
You were overruled, yeah. Women's rights, yes, I won. So it's great to be back on camera. It does feel a bit surreal actually on that one. But we got a wonderful guest. Karl, would you like to introduce?
So, Michael and I have never met, but we have met in a conversation on LinkedIn. And I just thought that someone that posts this sort of stuff online is an interesting person, got good experiences, and knows what he's talking about. And in the agile world, there are many that don't, but there are some that do, and we really want to hear from them. So, Michael, please introduce yourself, your background, and tell us how you got into agile and why you are where you are now.
Okay, so let me give you a long story from my teenage childhood time. So back in the early 90s, I was already computer nerd. I was always the one guy in the class who was doing stuff with computers. So when I was 13, I got into programming. And the first funny part, it might already relate to why I have a certain heart for agile, is yeah, so this computer science teacher, he gave us our assignments and then we got to work them off. And so that was regular class, but one day he made a mistake. He told us to program a very simple dice game. That was the mistake that he made because I liked making games. So what I didn't just fulfill the exercise. I turned it into a simple multiplayer game. Of course, back in the old days, it was not web, but just on a computer. And I gave it features with scores and everything. And then it got distributed in the whole class. And what do you think? Nobody was doing their coursework anymore. Everybody was doing the game. And so as soon as I handed out the floppy disk, people started playing. And then they came to me and they said, this is really cool, but this one doesn't really work like that. And it would be really cool if we could have another feature. Could you do it with that we might have different types of dice? Could we have betting money on this thing and things like that, virtual money, high scoring? And so whenever I gave them a new version, they told me which other things they wanted. And so what the teacher did is he gave us a very simple exercise, and that was the assignment. But what I did is I really turned it into agile product development. And I had a group of customers, my entire class. So the teacher's problem was that he couldn't get anyone to listen to him anymore. And my advantage was that I was really learning agile development. It wasn't called like that in the early 90s. It didn't have the name, but it was what it was. You build some software, you give it to people, you see how they respond to it. They'll give you some reactions, they request more, and you continuously improve to build the best product that you can. So that's where I started. What happened after that? I went to university, studied computer science, logically. When I got into the working world, I went into testing. I always have this knack for science and creating hypotheses, designing an experiment, figuring out how things turn out was appealing to me. From testing, I got into quality management, Six Sigma, got into Six Sigma very deeply, master black belt. That one, of course, also gave me the background in lean and Kanban. And so there was this time, it was, I think, 2008 or so, when I first read this thing called Agile Manifesto. But at that time, I was a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. And when they said this thing about people and interactions over processes and tools, what's Six Sigma? It's process management. So what was my first response? Those guys are nerds. They don't know what they're talking about. Forget this thing. It'll never work. But I have something really cool that works, and it's called Kanban. And I'm doing it with my teams, and it works really well. So I thought this agile thing is weird. And Kanban is really cool because it gave us the results. And with Kanban, I had the first experience of a high-performing team. So what we did with Kanban is we set up a pull system, a close collaborated team, and we pulled work through the system. We had constant communication from the beginning to the end, and it worked splendidly. We got done in a few weeks what others couldn't do in half a year. And it was not just on a technical level of performance. People were really excited to be on that team. And even a few years ago, I was talking to one of the team members, and she said that even after a decade, she was still drawing from the experiences of being on that team. And so despite the fact that I didn't call it Agile, and I didn't identify with the Agile movement at that time, this way of working was just the way that I was working naturally. And yeah, come time to pass, my first experience with Scrum in practice, it was probably the worst nightmare of what you could call Scrum. That was back in the, I'm not sure, it was 2010 or so, when the Scrum guide, the original Scrum guide, was still talking about the pigs and chickens. You remember?
Yeah, and it's common, unfortunately, a lot of people's first experience with Scrum isn't always a good experience. And I just wanted to confirm to our younger viewers, a floppy disk is actually what we used to use, which were like CDs. Just in case our younger viewers don't know what a floppy disk is, please Google it. It is what we used to have to use back in the olden days to put our data and transfer our data. Just had to confirm, because as soon as you said that, I thought, whoa, that brings me back.
I'm not going to talk about cassette tapes with computer programs on them then.
But you're right. Do you know what? A lot of people, their first experience with Scrum is normally a pretty bad experience. How bad was your experience, out of interest?
I'll tell you just one funny story, and that is why I have to get into this chicken and pigs metaphor. Because I was a quality manager on a cross-functional team, and what we were doing was one-piece flow. So what more effective way of working could you have? So we always had 2 or 3 people who took, we didn't call it a user story, it was a business requirement for us, forget terminology. We had this way of working, and we had a cycle time 2 days from the time business came with a demand until we delivered in production. That was what we had. And then came Scrum. And with Scrum, the first thing they told us, you cannot take requests during a sprint. You have to create a backlog, and then you have to serve them afterwards. The first thing we were saying, this is completely nuts. We could do it in 2 days, but now you're forcing us to wait for a week before even starting. That was the first weird thing. And the second thing is, talking chickens and pigs is because I was a quality manager. They told us that I, as a quality manager, am not allowed to participate in the dailies because the dailies are only for the developers. So I was forced to physically leave the team's room during the daily.
Wow.
I was also not allowed to participate in plannings and retrospectives because I was not a developer, and those were only developer events at that time. So that was weird. And then I will tell you, there's a tipping of the ice. I had a discussion with them as to why this was supposed to be like that. And then they brought out the chickens and the pig metaphor. So they said that you're just a chicken and these guys are pigs. And there was a devout Muslim in the room, and they said, this guy is a pig.
Whoa. So not only not only was Scrum creating actually limitations, but it was, wow.
So this is the problem with the religious application of anything. You know, I started doing Scrum before I actually read any of the manuals of how to. Before I even did any qualifications, I was doing it for 5 years, and just applying what I'd read about in anecdotal books. and it worked on big pieces of work. But the main thing that really I had to do when I started was to work out how long the sprints should be, because the sprint cycle is relative to the work. It's not relative to a mandatory 1 week, 2 week, or 4 week period. If you can actually deliver in 2 hours, that's fine. Then we can have a sprint in a day. And this is the thing that people don't understand. They apply these things in a religious fashion. Well, actually, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to make the church of Agile. We're trying to deliver work better, safer, to higher qualities, to ensure stability, to manage risk. That's what we're trying to do. And it's to make things better for the customer. And if we make it worse for the customer, we shouldn't be doing Agile.
No, I fully
really,
agree with you on this one. And that is, I mean, I'm working with many organizations in my coaching and consulting. And sometimes they really come to me and they already come with a solution. They say, we want to do either Scrum or Safe, because that's like 90% of the market. Sometimes I have the odd ones out. They say, we want to do Kanban. But either way, what I typically like to do is not start with the question, how can I implement this or that framework in your organization? Because I know all the frameworks. You can talk to me about Scrum, you can talk to me about Safe, you can talk to me about Crystal, you can talk to me about XP. That's not an issue. My question is, which problem are we trying to solve?
Yeah.
Exactly. Nail on the
Many
head.
organizations, they struggle with this.
Yeah.
It's not just that, it's also understanding, you know, because I get the same. I'll get places that say, Sprinter, can you come in and implement Scrum? And it's kind of like, well, is that actually best fit? Is that actually what you need? Is that the right framework? And then they go, oh no, we want a hybrid. Everything's a hybrid these days, because you're molding it to what best fits for your teams and for your customers. But you hit the nail on the head there.
I think that there's a big problem with saying we're going to choose a framework anyway, because it steps away from what is the work.
Yes.
So we're going to do Safe, and we run a mainframe. You're going to do what? You want to destroy your business. I mean, that's Safe is a very complex tool set for applying on top of a very complex tool set. How are you going to actually manage the transformation into Safe and not destroy your organization? And this is the other side of it. It's I look at the frameworks and I call them tools. They're actually tools that expose what might need to change. They're not necessarily the answer. I don't think any of the frameworks are the answer. I think they point to places to look for answers.
What I think, now you specifically mentioned Safe, I would like to get into a bit of the differences here. One thing that LESS as a framework is really strong about is what they call thinking tools. And that is to help people think about their existing challenges in an effective, logical manner. And that is already the first thing that is missing in many organizations. If we do not have the proper thinking tools to approach our challenges, then every solution is at best a lucky guess, but there's no systematic improvement. And if you ask me, of course, I'm a quality and process manager, you ask me what is the most important thing, it is not any specific state, whether it's the current state or the future state. It's a systematic, rigorous, continuous improvement process. Because once we've got that, we've got the capability to solve all of our challenges and not just one.
And we also got the mechanism then to deal with change, because everyone assumes that once you fix something, it stays fixed, which is not true, because the world is in constant flow. All of the parameters of problems are in constant flow, and therefore the problem itself is mutating as you're trying to fix it. So
yes, And then we get even into the level of what is actually the problem, because I sometimes like to crack this joke, IT without the people would be very easy. Because on a certain level, the technology nowadays is very reliable. I mean, I still remember the times when I was working with segmentation fault code for no specific reason other than that the compiler made a mistake. We don't have these issues nowadays. We can rely on our compilers, we can rely on our hardware to a very high degree. So that the most problems are really at some level people problem. I don't mean a problem between you and me, but it's a problem that I don't have the correct understanding of something, or I and you disagree on something without even realizing it because we have different mental models in our head. And so the technology is, it should not be our issue. But what people do with the technology and what people do with each other is the root cause of so many problems. And that is the point where classical project management breaks down, because we would assume that we are working in a deterministic structure. But what do you know what I will do 2 seconds from now? You can guess, but you don't know.
Yeah. But that's the whole basis of determinism, isn't it? It's the notion that we know in absolute fashion what the next things will be, whereas actual agile is about not knowing and accepting that we don't know, but being able to adapt to it as it happens. And I think that's kind of fundamental. And if we forget the word agile, even just being adaptable.
Yes. What I think is in this context, adaptability, one thing that I always like to educate my clients is that I'm not going to give you a robust way of working. I'm trying to work with you to produce a resilient way of working so that minor shocks to your system do not cause your system to collapse. So I don't know, half my team might be sick tomorrow. What's the worst thing that could happen? If this half of the team happens to be my development specialists and I only have testers left, then my delivery rate goes to 0.
Yep.
But what if I invest a little bit into cross-skilling? I would never say that I would expect that a tester is as good at developing software as a developer, or that I would expect a developer to have the detailed, intricate knowledge that is required to do a very good exploratory test or so. That's not the point, but there are some basic things that we can help each other out a little bit. And if we do this, just helping each other out a little bit in the good times, then during the times of need, things don't break down, they just become a bit more difficult. There might be some things we can't do, but there are other things that we can still do. And those are simple ways that don't cost us anything, that will improve the resilience of our organization and make it future-proof.
Yep.
I also, while you were going through that, it also reminded me of what I kind of describe as a pebble effect. You know, when you get a little pebble and you kind of throw it across the water and it bounces. And the way that you described things there reminded me when I normally speak to clients and they're saying, we want you to implement this, we want it all in this time scale, we want it really, really fast. And I always have to give them the example of the pebble effect of when you make one change, you've almost got to catch what the possible reaction is on the other side. And when you make another tweak, you've got to catch the reaction onto the other side. And how you describe it, it just reminded me of those moments as well.
Mm-hmm.
Of being able to actually, when you're implementing those changes, but also COVID as well is another example.
Yes. It was very funny. With COVID, I have a very curious experience because I just was joining a new client. And at that time, everybody in the Agile community was saying Agile requires us to be co-located. Everything has to be on site. And so this was the dogma at that time. And I was already challenging this dogma a bit because I said that the clients that I tend to work with, they're global players. They have experts for Team A sitting in Russia. At that time, Russia was in a different political situation than it is now. They have others sitting in Serbia, others in India, some in Malaysia, some in Brazil. How you want to collocate these people? And do you want to reel them all in to come to Germany to work? Probably not going to last very long because experts have certain fluctuation. In Germany alone, we don't have enough experts. So it's a very pragmatic question. You have to hire the people where you can get them. And it doesn't help us to come with a dogma to say that it has to be in a certain way, for reality looks different. So my clients, they were already international. And so I had to figure out ways, how can we get the structure that works remotely, how to run remote events. At that time, I was working already in a safe context, big corporations, they love safe, regardless of how agile one might think about it. So that was the context. So my first question was, how can we get those things to run in a remote context? And on the one hand, of course, I was trying to get my clients to say that, look, we are more effective if we at least have the PI planning on site so that people have this social moment, they know each other's faces, they can have the informal conversations. And we were already planning for that. And then COVID came. But the weird thing was, because we had already prepared both for working on site and we had lived in a reality that forced us to work remotely, when COVID hit, it meant zero change. It only meant that we couldn't do the change that we had planned. And I think that is what Agile really is being about, that you don't have to force something against reality, but that you use, just like judo, you use the strengths of reality in your favor rather than fighting against it. So that is what we were doing.
So I was working in an agile team. I wasn't involved in the as a Scrum Master or a coach or anything like that. I was actually doing another one of my skill sets, which is service design. But I was supporting the agile work because I understand the dynamics of it. And we were working on a massive piece of technology for a government. And the government had about 80 projects in flight at the same time as this one. The impact on COVID on our work, no impact at all. We just carried on and we actually delivered on the timeframes that we'd already, and I say timeframes, it wasn't deadlines, it was timeframes, because we estimated where we thought we might be at certain points. And we delivered according to the timeframes that we thought that we would. The reason that we were all in the office together was because the client required to see bodies for the money that they were paying for. That was the only reason. and that's just archaic, but that was the way they thought. We're paying for people, we expect them to be in our office. Yes. And that's just, now if you ask them, do you want all these people in your office? They're going, well, no, we can get a smaller office, or we get no office at all, because actually we don't need to be co-located anymore.
Yeah, so that is a fundamental learning. In your case, COVID catalyzed change. Mm-hmm. And this is what we really would like, that when the change comes, we're ready for it, and we don't have to make ends meet, but we can say we'll embrace it, and we're looking forward to make even better things happen in the new situation. That is what we would want from an agile organization. Yeah. I mean, I think in this one, it might be very useful to clarify terminology a bit. Many organizations, many managers, when they think of agile, they're talking about a certain way that work within a team or even within development is organized. But what I mean is when we are talking about agile, we mean about the ability to adapt to circumstances. And you can't do that only in development. I mean, does it even make sense from a logical perspective? Okay, our developers can adapt to change, but the rest of our business can't. why would the rest of the business not want to have this powerful ability?
I think another thing that COVID brought in was trust. That was the biggest shock, I think it was, because very similar to exactly what Karl said, you had a lot of clients that just wanted to physically see the bodies that they were actually paying for, which sometimes is down to lack of trust. If they're at home, are they actually going to be working? And the one thing COVID did with us all being locked down at home was these people had to trust us. Now, at the end of the day, we're all adults. At the end of the day, we've all got...
You speak for yourself.
I try to be an adult. I try. I have days I don't adult. We all know that. But at the end of the day, we've all got a job to do. And if we don't do the job, it's going to be very clear, no matter whether we're face-to-face or not face-to-face, whether the job's actually being done. So it not only built more trust in people, but it also started to give people flexibility. I almost felt before COVID, the world was due to explode in one way or another, because everyone's work-life balance had just gone out of the window. Even I was experiencing it. I was traveling so much that even my friends would actually say, I haven't seen you for months. And I'd be like, months? What do you mean? And they'd be like, oh, we've not seen you since November. And it's like, oh, no, I'm sure that was a couple of weeks ago. No, it's not. And it's because I was traveling so much. I was exhausted. I was here, there, and everywhere. I was working ridiculous hours trying to keep up. And being actually home and having that trust from my client meant that I can actually do things. I can still focus on my work and still focus on my clients, but also I could focus on me a bit as well, which I'd lost that. And I know a lot of people I spoke to had lost that over the years because they spent more time traveling into the office, stuck in traffic jams, running about into meetings, that they just kind of lost themselves. And that's one thing that not only COVID did, agility also brings as well as flexibility and actually being able to change.
Yes. I think this specific point is one where I rubbed a lot of against. I mean, I was ruffling a lot of feathers with some people in the Agile community, because they always argued that face-to-face communication is more effective, and it is not just the same if you meet each other over video. And I do agree, it is not the same. But for me, it was really, my clients, they were 2.5 hours away. Sometimes with traffic, it could be 3 hours. And saving 6 hours a day on commute, how much productivity gain do you expect from being face-to-face during a daily stand-up to justify 6 hours of concentration lost in traffic?
100%. And you know what? You're actually, now I'm going to go on my personal experience here. I'm actually quite happy to work an extra couple of hours sometimes. I'm actually, a lot of the time, I'm quite happy to work an extra couple of hours because one, I've saved on travel time. Two, it means I can clock off and finish when I feel like I'm ready to finish. And don't get me wrong, sometimes this can be a bad thing. But where you've got that little bit of extra that you're thinking, actually, I just need another 30 minutes just to clean this up and get this ready for tomorrow. You can do that because actually when you log off, you're already home. There's multiple benefits on that side. But there's also working from home. There's also, and what this situation has happened, there's also bad things where you don't log off. And some people can't walk, they don't have a space where they can walk away, where when you are in an office environment and where you are collaborating with people, when it's time to finish, there's a finish time. And everyone will then disperse, say goodbye, disperse. You get in your car and you drive home and you've got a clock off time. Where when you are at home, it is a big risk. And I don't know about anyone else, but I've personally fallen in that a couple of times where I've thought to myself, I just need a little bit longer. And it's 8 p.m. And I've just not realized that it had gone on, and I've done it multiple times. So that's possibly a little bit of the pro side of it.
Yes. In this one, it's also very interesting that there are statistics that make exactly the case that you said, that remote workers, they are more than happy to put in an extra hour here or there just to get the job done well and on time in good quality, they don't have any issue with that. Whereas the office worker will, of course, I'm the last person in the office. It's already one thing and it's tired. I might not be able to catch the last train home. So it's better to cancel and continue tomorrow, which especially in knowledge work is very, very detrimental, because if I'm in the flow and then I interrupt, it might cost me half a day to get back into that same flow. And this one is yet another advantage that many people have completely underestimated before COVID, that when I am at home and I manage, I mean, in developers speak, there's this magical thing called the zone. If I get into the zone, I can just turn off the chat, I can get my job done, and I can be super, hyper, totally productive, deliver great workmanship for the time it takes me to do it. And when that time is over, I'm out of the zone again, I can relax, I can do whatever, but I have brought the results. And I mean, I run a business. I don't care for the work that people do. I care for the results that they produce and the money that lands in my pockets at the end of the month. That's what I care for when I run a business. And that is what I can get from people working in a remote environment, even better than I could get it from them when they're in the office. And this is something, when I'm doing knowledge work, I can't tell you that I will have a good idea between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. It's not guaranteed. Maybe I've got this brilliant idea at 8 p.m. and then I gotta sit down for 3 hours and do it. But then tomorrow you've got your result.
Yeah, and that's really the main thing, is that actual invention, actual work that adds value doesn't happen in time frames. It happens by inspiration, by reflection, by engagement. It's if we wanted to just crank out the same thing that everyone else has had, we just wouldn't need any developers. What developers actually do, and what most people do with their work, is they think about it and then, like a detective, discover a way to resolve it. So it's all problem solving. The fact that the manifestation for a developer is an application or a piece of infrastructure is just the hammer and materials that they use. It's not any different from an office worker who creates a magnificent report that suggests actually we should stop trading with certain businesses. It's all work. It's just the insights and the knowledge based around the knowledge that's gained, the people around you that you can speak to, and the drawdown of resources and information, and how you respond to it. That's the inspiration moment that can really have a vast impact.
Yes. And that one brings me to another one of actually my favorite gripes that I have with the modern day Agile community, is that we have lost the sight of this specific aspect completely, that what software development really is, and that is the ability to turn a human problem. For example, what do I want? I want to get food to my home faster. So what might I build is an online food ordering platform or so. So basically, it's always a human problem at the core. And we use software to solve this human problem. So what we need is people who understand this process very well, how to do this in a reliable fashion, turn human problems into technological solutions in a feasible, reliable way that a machine can repeat an infinite amount of times. So what we need for that is the one part where we need engineering practice, the quality, the ability to deliver craftsmanship that is able to translate the human problem into a technical solution in a way that we don't have two human problems after fixing one.
Yeah.
And we have lost sight of this. And that is one thing that many agile coaches, they forget, that if we cannot address this challenge, some organizations, they're just bad at this. I'm not saying that an individual developer is bad at it, but some organizations, they forgot about it and their structure is not organized. And then they say, please give us 3 pounds of agile.
Like they've lost their way. You do find a lot of places that have been doing agility for a while, sometimes just lose their way on the path. And I think that that's what gives us our jobs, is to be able to bring them back onto the path and remind them, because it's so easy these days with everything, so much going on, so much technology, so many different ways of working.
There is complacency as well. We got
There's
it working,
complacency.
and actually we've now finished our transformation journey, and we don't need to do any more. We don't need to support people anymore. They all know what they're doing. Well, actually, the goalpost keeps on moving, and so people still need support. People still need to be encouraged to think and work differently, because it is a different set of principles around work. It's a different way to value each other and each other's input, and moving from a me world to my team and our work together is a very different way. I actually consider Agile to be revolutionary, because it does actually fundamentally change our relationship to work and our relationships to each other.
I might argue that it only does that if you didn't work like that before already.
Well, a lot of people don't, because they're wrapped up in themselves.
Yes, on the one hand. On the other hand, this is one of the things that I really have an issue sometimes with management, because you find teams working in this way and they do it very effectively. And then comes a new CEO, not CEO, CTO usually, or CIO, and they said, my last company, we did do Agile and it helped us become a lot better. So now you too will be doing Agile and everything will be a lot better. And then what are you doing the kind of transformation for? Because people were already doing it and you're just introducing them to a certain rigor of structuring, of having events, of no, you're not allowed to call it a requirement. It's supposed to be a user story. You're not allowed to estimate it in hours. You must estimate it in story points and those kind of things. And then developers do that. And then they say, okay, now we've done it. What is better now? The only thing that I realize is we're wasting more time in meetings.
Yeah. So one of my common themes is that Agile was created to remove bureaucracy and simplify the working process. And what have we done? We've allowed it to become the new bureaucracy and to make the working process more complex. So if you're doing Agile and your environment is as complex as it was before, you probably took the wrong turn somewhere.
Oh, definitely. And that is now specifically taking a turn back into the direction of safe. Is my favorite saying is that you don't want to have the disease that safe cures.
Wow, that is the best one I've heard so far.
But there are the organizations where bureaucracy is so rampant. I was one time talking to a senior developer who told me that literally he's spending 42 hours a week in meetings. And sometimes when a meeting is boring, he can take out his laptop to get some coding done. And in those kind of organizations, if I can get a developer to only spend like 20% of their time in meeting, then I have improved somebody's life, regardless of what you think about a certain framework.
So there is a magic bullet for meetings.
Oh no, don't use the magic bullet. Don't.
Oh no, there is one.
Bullet.
There is one for meetings. You're invited to this meeting. Great. Can you send me an agenda? No, we don't have an agenda. Okay. Tell me what we will have achieved at the end of the meeting. Oh, we don't know that. I said, well, when you know those two things, I'll come to your meeting. Until then, I've got actual work to do.
The other one is come to the meeting. We think you are firstly, the ones I like to use is, make sure you've got the people that you actually require. So think about it. but also give them the option that if you turn up to a meeting and you're not actually required, or you don't feel that you can actually produce value, it's okay to leave. You're not going to offend anyone.
Yes.
It's okay to walk away or turn around or just put a little message and go, do you know what? It's not for me, and walk away. And that's fine, because it means you're not wasted their time. They can get on and focus what they need to focus. You haven't got people sat there twiddling their fingers like this, huffing, puffing, or complaining that they're spending all their time in meetings that don't require. Or, you know, there's multiple different ways, thinking out the box, doing something a bit different.
Actually, what you were hinting is law of 2 feet, and it's also something that I like to introduce with more mature organizations, because it's a game changer. Once they've got the basics going, then I say, let's look at your meeting calendar and cut it down by introducing the law of 2 feet. But another thing is that one reason why organizations have a lot of meetings is because of the inability to structure work. If I say I'm the sales guy, I'm not an IT guy, I'm the sales guy, and I have this customer and they say we really need this, and then we'll sign the contract. So what do? I go to my IT department and tell them, you really need to get this going until the end of the week so that we can get this contract signed. And it's massive. And of course, what will IT say? No, we can't do by the end of the week. We have other work to do, priorities. Please let us make a plan before. So what'll I do? IT doesn't want to collaborate, so I'll go to the CIO or even the CEO and says, we've got this huge deal and IT is blocking me and I have to do it, and I'll call for a meeting to see how I can squeeze it into the schedule. But I'm not the only sales guy. There's 20 others like me, and each of them has this stuff and it must be done by Friday. And because they can't do it, I'll call for a meeting. And so what is IT doing? They're telling me why they can't do the work, because I'm not giving them the time to do the work.
Yeah, there's lots of problems like that, and I think we're kind of at the end of our time. I think it would be great to have you back to have some more conversations and maybe do a panel session about the state of Agile, because I think that
I thought of a theme: top 10 bugbears. Top 10 bugbears of things that just aren't working at the moment. Or things that need to. I think that would be the next theme. It's got to be done.
Okay, well, we'll talk offline about it. Thank you so much, Michael. It was really good to meet you for this first time in digital world, at least. And hopefully you'll come back and speak with us again.
Sure. It's nice meeting you, Karl, Sabrina.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.